Hello, welcome to Money Matters TV. I'm Mike Dever, the founder of Brandywine Asset Management, and my co-host today is Audrey Greenberg, co-founder of the Center for Breakthrough Medicines and Discovery Labs. And in addition, we have our guest today of David Jansen, CEO of Sail Fusion, which is a company that's developing a system to beat lower back pain, which is the single leading cause of disability around the world. I personally have an interest in this subject. Welcome, Audrey.
Hi, thanks.
Hi.
Thanks for having me. Good to see you.
Yeah, before we get to David, I have a question for you. So the supply chain is out of control right now.
Yeah.
What are you seeing in your business? Is there any delays in construction with equipment or people and anything along those lines?
Unfortunately, across the board, there are supply chain issues. Everything from doors to drywall to equipment, air handling units, steel, wood. Unfortunately, it's our people. So it's been a challenging time. However, I think with good business planning and understanding the supply chain constraints, having redundancy of suppliers, and a really aggressive procurement strategy helps a lot. And I think one thing that helps us at Discovery Labs and the Center for Breakthrough Medicines is we're building and bringing online 700,000 square feet plus of GMP lab space, office space, and R&D space. So the fact that we're building at such a large scale helps us tremendously with suppliers. So that's something that has worked to our advantage. We also have a strategic partnership with MLP Builders, which is a construction outfit, and they definitely help us with the construction aspect and labor that's involved in bringing the space online.
Does that mean you're more in the front of the line, being a larger customer, that they pay attention to you? If smaller businesses might not have the same attention.
Yeah, I mean, certainly it does help to economies of scale, right? So we're able to, if we're purchasing, more than one HVAC, we're building air handling units, so to speak. If we're building out, 600,000 square feet, let's call it, and we need, let's say 6 large air handling units, we need backup generators, we're buying at scale, and that definitely helps with supplier relations and getting to the front of the queue.
Yeah, just if you could just back up then for 1 minute and tell the audience that's not familiar with what it is you're doing, why are you building so much square footage and what is that space being used for? A little background again here on your business.
Yeah, I'm happy to. So I'm the founder of the Center for Breakthrough Medicines and Discovery Labs. Discovery Labs is a 3 million square foot ecosystem for life science companies that are looking to cohabitate with other healthcare organizations. And we're located in Silicon Valley, which is what Philadelphia is quickly becoming known as. There's just a lack of lab space and biopharma services. We are in really a revolutionary period for medicine with our ability to cure instead of treat cancer and genetic disease. There is a tremendous amount of momentum right now in precision medicine. A lot of that technology is coming out of University of Pennsylvania and Children's Hospital of Philadelphia. So building out lab space and services here in Philadelphia makes a lot of sense, not just for the local community, but really attracting global players from around the world to establish operations here or do their manufacturing through our CDMO, the Center for Breakthrough Medicines, which is a cell and gene therapy focused CDMO that has tremendous capacity all in one site, producing everything from the critical supply constrained components for cell and gene therapies to the cell and gene therapies themselves. So we're building this capacity for these companies that are treating patients with sickness, and we're very excited to be bringing this online to really open up capacity so that patients can get the cures that they need.
When will we start to see, what's the timeline? When will we as patients be able to start seeing the actual benefit of what it is you've got in the pipeline?
Yeah, that's a great question. So we have our process development labs online now, and by June of next year, we'll have our GMP suites online where we can do the manufacturing, starting with viral vectors, which are used for gene therapy, and then shortly thereafter, our cell therapy suites, which are used for cancer.
Oh, that's great.
Yeah.
Now to jump back on the supply chain issues, is there anything you can recommend or how other businesses might mitigate their supply chain issues that they're encountering?
Yeah, I think taking your normal lead times and multiplying them by 3, unfortunately, can be helpful, or maybe even by 2. But in particular with people too, right? So there's a lot of demand for expertise and headcount right now. People are leaving the labor force. You've heard about the great resignation that happened during COVID and is continuing to sort of affect people's ability or willingness really to go back to work. In particular, people are retiring at earlier ages. So all of that leads to labor shortage. So you're experiencing problems not just with shipping, but with labor and with chips, right? So a lot of these biotech equipment has chips that goes in them, as well as air handling units for that matter. So getting in front of supply chain issues by having strategic relationships with those vendors, ordering well in advance, and having redundant providers really, really helps.
Okay. Well, thank you.
Yeah.
I'd like to jump into a question here. We have a viewer question.
Oh, yeah.
So Audrey, this is from Betty Roberts of Philadelphia. Could you name some research companies that rate or provide information on biotech companies?
That is a really good question from Betty. So thank you, Betty, for the question. There's a lot of different companies that look at the biotechnology industry from different perspectives. So if you're talking about if you're an employee looking for a job, there's the top biotech employers. If you're an investor looking for stocks, there's the top biotech investments. I look at the market from a innovation perspective. So who are the biggest biotech innovators out there? What are they working on? And how can I get some action in that potential investment? But from my perspective, I often go to Cell and Gene, which is a good source of information, but that's obviously for the cell and gene industry. Forbes has a lot of good information. BioBuzz, BioPharm International, Chemical and Engineering News is also a good source. We're a contract manufacturer at the Center for Breakthrough Medicine, so I also go to Contract Pharma, which talks about our industry and those looking to outsource manufacturing. I also find some good information on drug discovery and development. They have a lot of good articles and coverage of biotechs. And then Reuters and Pharmatech. And then lastly, there's sort of a more general database of information at Investopedia, which tends to rank companies in different industries. So there's a lot of different sources out there. Google's very helpful. And then there's also the Wall Street research firms that provide great research reports on biotech and certain subsets within the biotech industry. So if you have a good brokerage house that you go to, you can call your investment advisor. You could probably call Mike for that matter. He probably has some good research that he can give you on biotech and the top players in that space.
Okay, great. Thank you very much. And anyone else has an interest in asking a question at Money Matters TV, here's how you can send in your questions to Money Matters.
You can have your questions answered on Money Matters. Please go to our website, money-matterstv.com. On our homepage, click on the banner on the right that says, Send us your questions. While you're on our website, you can find information about our host and guests, as well as show notes and links about this show and past shows. Money Matters is also available as a podcast on iTunes and Stitcher, so you can listen to Money Matters while you're on the go. That website address, again, is money, MONEY, -matters, MATTERS, TV.com.
Okay, so Audrey, with that, we offered David Jansen a warm welcome to this week's episode of Money Matters TV.
Welcome. Hello.
David, yes, hello there. Welcome. And once again, David is the CEO of Sale Fusion. Tell us a little bit about who you are and what it is you're doing.
Yeah, absolutely. So I'm founder of Sale Fusion. It's a sacroiliac fusion device company. So most people aren't familiar with that joint. It's at the bottom of your spine. Each side of your tailbone is a huge joint that goes between the rest of your pelvis. And it accounts for about 30% of lower back pain. And so our system, our device is to treat that, to help spine surgeons treat disorders of that joint. And through a process called fusion. You've probably heard of spine fusion. This is just a different part of the spine and the orthopedics. So what we've been doing is we are fundraising. We're in the early stage developing the technology. looking to go to the FDA and get approval for this from a regulatory standpoint, and then launch. So small orthopedic startup company.
How did you get into that? From where were you that took you into medical business, and what's your background that led to that?
Yeah, I mean, I've been very blessed to have grown up around this. I grew up in Minneapolis and watched a lot of the orthopedic spine and orthopedic companies grow up there, like Spine-Tech, which is now Zimmer. And, then beyond there, went to school, got to spend some time at HCMC in Minneapolis, researching the spine. But then, worked for a local Westchester, Pennsylvania company called Synthes, which is now J&J's DePuy Synthes, worked for Globus Medical. So there's a huge amount of orthopedic medical device companies going on, especially in this, greater Philadelphia area. But there's a number of hotspots around the country. So had an opportunity to kind of grow up within product development, do a lot of really neat things at those larger companies, as well as a couple smaller companies. And now here I am.
So it sounds like you've spent a lot of time in the industry. How have you seen it change over the years? Is medical device different? And you mentioned you're in conversations with the FDA. Have you seen the regulatory environment change during that period as well?
Yeah, both have changed so dramatically. And I really appreciate what you had said, Audrey. The sophistication has changed. Looking at what happens with pharma, it also is applied elsewhere, that we're now doing more complicated things. We're doing more interesting things that can treat an actual issue as opposed to just a symptom. And so the sophistication has gone up and innovation has certainly accelerated throughout that. But then that comes with some challenges, right? There's more regulation, there's more compliance, quality systems, which all in the end come down to more overhead for large companies especially, but even the smaller companies to be able to bring a product to market.
Yeah, that would seem like it's quite a barrier to entry for a small business like yours. Is it make it more difficult? Has the process changed dramatically then over that period of time to where maybe 20 years ago you had an idea, some spinal fusion idea or product, you bring it to market, and now is it taking longer? We don't have any of this big ramp up like we had with the COVID, vaccines.
Well, COVID made everything tough, but thankfully, things have changed, yes, but they're still approachable. It's still the kind of thing that there's an established process. We just need to follow the process. So sometimes things take a little bit longer because you need to validate earlier in the process as opposed to later. You need to test things more than you may have would otherwise. I think that's hit larger companies more because there's maybe a bigger target on their back, from a regulation, legal standpoint. So that's where you've seen, larger companies like a Johnson & Johnson or a lot of traditional pharma companies using outside innovation, so where they can find a startup that can do this fast, nimbly, and without all the overhead of existing products. They'll look for those. Once they get some traction, some success, then they'll bring them in-house. And so I've just seen a lot more external innovation, which is motivation for why I'm doing my startup.
Yeah, well, talk a little bit more about that external innovation. What does that look like, and how is that playing out in the market right now?
Yeah, certainly. I mean, I think that you're probably an expert on this. Within pharma, you've seen people leave a large pharmaceutical device company or pharmaceutical company, go off with an idea, pursue it, probably in a lab like yours, working with outside, contract manufacturing like yours, bring the product up to the point where they're doing clinical trials, and then it becomes attractive to a large pharma company. Now, this is happening later in the process history, but the orthopedic and the other more device-focused medical device companies are looking at, hey, all of this overhead to be able to comply with EU MDR regulations or further requirements with the FDA, or more so just compliance tracking post-market. They're starting to say, hey, internally, we don't have the resources to maintain all the staff for compliance and ongoing monitoring. And so we have fewer staff that are focused on new product development. And so that's where the budgets that are going towards external innovation for either acquisition or external development. There's a lot of great design firms, especially here in the Philadelphia area, that are doing contract design work, which is another opportunity for external innovation.
Can you tell us a little more? You talked about it a little bit in the beginning, but your company specifically, is it it's a single product? Is it a suite of products? Is it a procedure, or is it actual material or something that's going to be used? What exactly is it, and what specifically can it solve the problem for?
Yeah, so I'll answer your last question first. So if you have unresolved sacroiliac joint pain or SI joint pain, that up to 5 years of pain where steroid injections haven't solved it, and most spine pain goes away without any treatment. It's just, spine will fix itself. But in that situation where you have long chronic pain, then surgeons can choose to fuse the joint. There's very few options for that, and so our device is it's a device that helps surgeons approach it from a way that they're comfortable with, and makes it a little bit easier on the patient and for the surgeon to do this procedure. So what the device is, it's a piece of metal, a couple screws that holds the bones in place, along with all the procedural items like the instruments. So in that sense, it's kind of a system to approach this. But there's no pharmaceutical devices. It's purely a metallic device to help with this sacroiliac joint fusion.
So it's not something that stays in the body. It helps with the procedure.
It is something that stays in the body.
It does.
So yeah. So along with a lot of orthopedic procedures, it's easier to just leave the piece of metal in the body, which some people find weird. Sometimes you'll have it taken out of, let's say, an ankle or other places, but primarily in the spine, they'll leave the device in. And once the body heals, then it's extra and it doesn't do anything that's harmful.
And that won't interfere with MRIs or passing through the airport or,
Thankfully, no, and especially with titanium. So if you're talking about a cobalt chrome, which is maybe a total joint like a knee or a hip, then maybe you could notice that, going through the airport, but usually not. But in the case of our system, a lot of spinal implants, it's using special alloys of titanium, which don't have any issue with MRIs or X-ray.
Yeah.
And how long do you expect this to take, the process?
Yeah, so it's actually fairly fast, from the idea of concept generation all the way to bringing something to market can be as fast as, under 2 years. We've been developing this device with a few surgeons out of Cedars-Sinai, Yale, University of Colorado, who came up with this idea. We've been developing this now for a couple of years, but this final push to, finalize the design, go through the regulatory process, the validation process, and then get approval to sale. We've got about another year left to go.
Yeah. What does it take to launch a company like this? We have a lot of aspiring entrepreneurs out there that maybe they have an idea for a biotech startup or a medical device company. What do you think these prospective potential entrepreneurs should be thinking about, and what can they do to replicate your success?
Yeah, certainly. And I think what's amazing to think about is there's just an abundance of opportunities. And so having worked in these companies, there are a billion great ideas flying around all the time. And so with the skills that people have, with a little planning, they can go out, they can find investors who are interested to jump on board. So with a compelling message and a great idea, there are people who are willing to fund great ideas so that they can continue through the development. It doesn't take much in terms of money to develop one of these devices. So you can work with angel investors or, if you have surgeons who are interested in the device as well, oftentimes they'll invest as well. And that can bring you all the way to the point of then commercializing. So for anybody who's working within any of the large OEMs, the device makers or pharma makers, it's having this idea that you're passionate about and then just starting to network. I've found that just connecting with other people within industry is the absolute best way of making things happen. And so reach out to your network, find people who are also interested in your idea, and you'll certainly find ways of taking that to market.
Well, I'm definitely interested in your idea. I've had 3 kids and definitely have some ramifications of childbirth and bearing children. And I think that is a big problem with SI joint and joint pain, not just for women that have had children, but also for athletes out there. So there's a large potential untapped market for your device.
Absolutely. The SI joint has actually been wholly untreated for a very long time. The vast majority of people with unresolved SI joint pain are often told, well, you're just going to have to live with it or get steroid injections every 6 months for a very long period of time. But you hit the nail on the head. It's the large portion of the population who have this ongoing pain is women after childbirth, because the relaxin causes the pelvis to expand and flex. And then sometimes it just doesn't go back the way that it should. And then also with athletes, because every step from your femur up to your spine, all that load has to be sheared through the SI joint. And so those two are the most common reason why. But with no great treatment out there, surgeons have unfortunately had to say, hey, if you've got lower back pain and we've identified it as coming from your sacroiliac joint, we don't have a great solution for you. So that's where innovation starts to happen. There's an unmet need. Surgeons have an idea of, hey, we could do it by doing this. And then you test that out with industry folks, engineers like myself, who can say, yeah, that's a great idea. Here's a good way of accomplishing that. And then those two together can come up with a good device.
When you said that it doesn't take a lot of money, what does that mean? Some people, a lot of money is $10,000, and other people it's 10 million. Elon Musk is, there is no a lot of money. He's got it all. But so what for this type of advice? What is it you require from investors to take it into market or get it to an exit in some fashion?
Yeah, certainly. Some of my statement there may have been influenced by, seeing the budgets for devices at a large OEM. If you wanted to bring a device to market at a Johnson & Johnson or an equally sized company, we're talking in the order of 10, 15, $20 million to, support everything over many, many years, anywhere from 5 to 10 years to develop a product. But in a startup, you could take an idea and bring it to market, get those initial cases for anywhere from $800,000 to $2 million altogether. And that includes everything from prototyping, verification, validation, going to the FDA, doing cadaver labs to test it out, and then even building the sets, the instruments and the implants needed for surgeries. So it's actually much less expensive to do it within a startup than it is to do it within a large company.
Mm-hmm.
Okay.
And you mentioned OEM. Tell us a little bit what OEM is, and then could you also talk about? And you did touch on this a little bit. Big pharma, they're just M&A shops. You mentioned a lot of the overhead costs. From my perspective, what I've seen is a shift in risk. Right? It takes so long. It used to cost $2 billion, take 10 years, bring a product to market. They just want to take a less risk and spend less money and be closer to commercialization. So tell us a little bit about what OEM is and what you're seeing out there for when big and large OEMs, external innovation teams, are interested in startups.
Yeah, so OEM, original equipment manufacturer, that's the manufacturer of note. So when you think of a device, when you think of an implant, when you think of something that's being made, it's the company whose brand name is labeled all over it. And so, Johnson & Johnson, it's a giant company that has produced many of the implants or drugs that are on the market. That would be the OEM. Now, they work with CMOs, like what your company does, contract manufacturing organization, to produce the product, to actually manufacture it, create it. And so they work together hand in hand. But exactly what you said, the risk of developing a product in-house is so high. They have to narrow and focus their resources on developing one or two ideas. And if they're wrong, and we've all are wrong at some times, but if they make the wrong bet or if it takes too long to develop, then they may be surpassed by somebody else who's more nimble. And so this external innovation idea allows them to say, there are maybe 15 companies in a space. We're going to look to see who gets initial traction. We're going to invest in them, see if they can grow even more, and then we'll bring them into the fold, and then it will become part of this greater being. And so, yeah, the external innovation has been a standard within pharma for a long time, and we're starting to see it more within traditional devices.
Does that mean then that your business now is partnering with OEMs already, or is there a certain phase or stage you get to where the OEMs say, hey, we want to be in on this sale fusion?
Yeah, so it's been wonderful to talk with a lot of the major companies. And so I've already had conversations with the external innovation teams at most of the top 6 OEMs within orthopedic spine. And they're very interested. And they have very clear guidelines of what they want out of companies for acquisition. But recognizing that their quality requirements are so much greater than a startup, it requires a little bit of work for them to come in, say, okay, we're going to bring your company into the fold, but we need to make sure that everything's done correctly, that there aren't any ghosts in the closet, that kind of thing. So that goes back to my point of networking. The more people that you know and can reach out to within the overall industry, the better. And I think everybody would be surprised to find out just how willing and interested the average investor or OEM is to talk to young and entrepreneurial folks.
Talk to us about the global market. I mean, SI joint pain has to be a global phenomenon. Is that something that's more in the US? Is it global? And then if it is a global phenomenon, is it difficult to commercialize a product globally? And what do you need to be thinking about?
Yeah, so the U.S. is about half the market for spine procedures, mainly because in the U.S. we have higher costs for implants because of our health system, but we also really take care of people and we say, look, if you have spine pain, we're going to treat it. Outside of that, you're looking at Europe, Japan, and a couple other wealthy countries. Outside of that, there are more traditional, more basic ways of treating SI joint issues. But yeah, commercializing within the US is oftentimes the first step, especially if you have a low risk device, which there's a certain pathway through the FDA for lower risk devices, which we have. So getting experience in the US, there's about 1.4 million people a year that have unresolved SI joint pain. So it's a fairly large market, but less than 10% of that is actually getting treatment for it because of lack of options. To expand out into Europe, there's a different regulatory process, compliant process, and oftentimes for a startup, that would be the next stage of their roadmap.
And what does it cost? What will it cost for somebody that has this pain? And will it be covered by insurance? How do you work through that process?
Yeah, that's a very important thing for any startup to consider is the reimbursement process, to make sure that part of your pathway to go to market is to consider the insurance companies, what they will currently cover and what they may need to push for coverage. For a very fast, nimble startup, they need to make sure that they have what are called existing CPT codes or reimbursement codes. And so fortunately for SI Fusion, there are existing codes, and it goes anywhere from $5,000 to $10,000 for a full procedure. But fortunately, that's reimbursed by insurance. And with good health insurance, most people should be able to get covered.
Okay. And what would you recommend people that want to get into the field, if young professionals to even maybe younger, going through school that are interested in biotechnology or orthopedics specifically, maybe?
Yeah, so the engineering study is fantastic, and there are so many different areas to study. If you're looking at orthopedics, mechanical engineering, or biomedical engineering with a focus on mechanics is a great opportunity. And there's some amazing schools around the area. Drexel is a wonderful school. Penn, we see a lot of students coming out of there who are coming right into the industry. Beyond that, it's internships and, again, networking, reaching out to companies, try to get that experience, and just show that you're passionate about it. There are so many opportunities within hospitals to do research, to find special projects outside of schoolwork. So I think there's a lot of opportunities for people to get into the industry. But once you're in the industry, there's so many opportunities and great companies to work for.
Okay. Well, thank you very much, David. It's nice having you on the show. You did a great job, and I look forward to seeing how this progresses for personal reasons as well. So I'm one of those probably bad athletes that did everything they could to damage my body over the years. Thank you very much. And
yes,
thank you,
Audrey. Thank you for having me. Appreciate it.
Okay. Our next guest is Len Goetz from Pasco Financial for next week. We'd like to thank you for watching Money Matters, where your money matters. See you next time.